The lake was still asleep when Marcus set his line into the water. The sun had barely begun to crawl over the treetops, and a thin mist drifted lazily above the surface, wrapping the shoreline in a ghostly veil. He loved these hours. No phones, no chatter, no demands. Just the hush of nature and the quiet rhythm of his own breath. He sat at the edge of his wooden dock, boots crossed, fishing pole propped lazily in hand. A mug of black coffee steamed beside him, and the faint call of a loon echoed across Lake Serenity. For Marcus, this was freedom, the kind he'd bled for overseas, the kind he'd fought to hold on to after the collapse of his marriage. But paradise, he knew, never stays unchallenged for long. From behind, the crunch of gravel broke the silence. Marcus turned. Up the slope of his property, a sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop, lights flashing in the dim dawn. Another pulled in right behind it. Marcus frowned. He hadn't called anyone. He hadn't done anything wrong. The doors opened, and two deputies stepped out, hands resting on their belts, eyes sharp as they scanned the quiet cabin. And then, trailing behind them like she was leading a parade, came a figure in a silk pink bathrobe and oversized sunglasses, sipping a latte as if the lake belonged to her. Brenda. Marcus had seen her once or twice from a distance since she'd bought the big house across the water. She always moved like the world was her stage. Perfect hair, dripping jewelry, the kind of smile that wasn't a smile at all, but a warning. She pointed straight at him. There he is. That's the trespasser. The taller deputy adjusted his hat and started down toward the dock. Morning, sir. Mind telling us what you're doing here? Marcus raised an eyebrow, calm but firm. Fishing. On my dock. At my cabin. The other deputy cut in. This property belonged to you? Before Marcus could answer, Brenda swooped in with a gasp, so exaggerated it was almost comical. Deputies, he's lying. This land is under the authority of the Serenity Lakes Homeowners Association. He's been warned. He doesn't belong here. Marcus set his fishing pole aside, stood, and faced them squarely. His posture was straight, steady, the kind you couldn't fake, the kind drilled into him by years in uniform. This land's been in my family for 3 generations. It was here long before your little HOA, and I've got the deed to prove it. Brenda scoffed, sipping her latte as though the argument was already won. He's making it up. Arrest him. I've already filed complaints. The deputies exchanged a look. Not certain, not hostile, just tired. This wasn't their first rodeo with Brenda Sterling. Marcus could read it in their eyes. But protocol was protocol. Sir, the taller deputy said, we're going to need to see some paperwork. Marcus didn't hesitate. He walked calmly back to the cabin, the deputies following. Brenda trailed behind them, muttering legal jargon she barely understood. Inside, Marcus pulled a leather folder from his desk drawer. When he returned, he placed it on the hood of the cruiser and flipped it open. The deed, the survey maps, the county seal, all in order. The deputies leaned over it in silence. Brenda craned her neck, squinting, clearly trying to find a flaw, any flaw. Finally, the shorter deputy closed the folder and looked Marcus dead in the eye. All right, Mr. Reed. Everything checks out. You're good here. Brenda's jaw dropped. What? No. You don't understand. He's... Ma'am, the deputy interrupted. This man owns his property outright. You've got no authority here. None. Marcus almost smiled, but he kept his composure. Years of discipline taught him not to gloat, not to show weakness, not to give the enemy more than they deserved. He simply said, anything else, gentlemen? The deputies shook their heads. One muttered, sorry for the trouble. They climbed back into their cruisers. Brenda, however, stood frozen in the gravel, pink bathrobe glowing in the morning sun like some ridiculous battle flag. She looked at Marcus as if he'd committed a personal crime by existing. And in that moment, Marcus understood, this was no misunderstanding. This was war. As the cruisers drove away, Brenda leaned forward, lowered her sunglasses, and hissed in a voice meant only for him. You'll regret this. Marcus watched her retreat back up the hill. His coffee had gone cold. His fishing line hung slack in the water. The peace of dawn was gone. And so, the first shot had been fired. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. Marcus went about his routine, chopping wood, patching his boat, jogging the old trails through the pines. But behind every task, the memory of Brenda's last words burned in his mind. "You'll regret this." It wasn't the kind of threat you took lightly. Brenda Sterling wasn't some harmless busybody. She had power, not real authority, but the kind that thrived in whispers, gossip, and intimidation. And in a small county, that could be just as dangerous as any weapon. It began with letters. One morning, Marcus found a bright yellow envelope tucked into his screen door. Notice of violation. According to Brenda, the HOA had determined his dock was non-compliant with lakefront community standards. Marcus read it twice, then laughed. The so-called HOA didn't even legally extend to his side of the lake. His cabin had been carved from county land long before the development sprang up across the water. Still, the notice was printed on official-looking paper, with a cheap logo and bold letters stamped "Final Warning." He tossed it in the trash. The next day, another envelope appeared. This one claimed his fishing boat was an eyesore and must be removed. The day after that, a third arrived, accusing him of running an unlicensed business from his cabin, each more absurd than the last. Marcus knew the tactic well. In the military, they called it psychological warfare. Paper bullets, a constant barrage meant to wear you down, to make you crack. But Marcus had faced worse enemies than Brenda Sterling. He began keeping the letters, stacking them neatly in a file. Evidence. Still, her campaign escalated. One evening, as he returned from town, Marcus noticed something off about the gate to his driveway. A bright red sticker clung to it. Property condemned. Unsafe structure. He ripped it down, fury rising in his chest. Who had the authority to post this? Certainly not Brenda. But then he saw the fine print. It bore the seal of the county zoning office. She'd gone further than harassment. She'd pulled strings. Marcus drove straight to the county clerk the next morning. The woman behind the desk, gray-haired and weary-eyed, barely looked up as he explained the situation. When she finally did, she sighed. "Mr. Reed, I'll be honest with you. We've had complaints. Dozens. From Mrs. Sterling and her so-called association. We're required to follow up. That's why the sticker went up." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "And did anyone actually inspect my cabin?" The clerk shifted uncomfortably. "Not yet, but the file is thick and it has signatures. From the right people." Marcus leaned forward, his voice low, steady, the way it had been in interrogation rooms overseas. "You and I both know signatures don't make lies true. You send an inspector today, and when he finds nothing wrong, you're going to pull that file and mark every complaint as fraudulent. Understand?" The clerk swallowed. There was steel in Marcus's voice that made her nod without argument. But even as he left the office, Marcus knew Brenda wouldn't stop. She had a network, neighbors who feared her, county officials who owed her favors, maybe even deputies who didn't want to cross her. And Marcus? He was just one man, but one man with patience, with training, with a will that had carried him through firefights in foreign deserts and jungles. Brenda might have her paper bullets, but Marcus Reed was preparing for a different kind of war. For a while, Marcus thought the storm might pass. The county inspector came, clipboard in hand, and after a slow walk around the cabin, shook his head. "Place is solid," he said. "Cleaner than half the houses in this county. You've got nothing to worry about." Marcus nodded, but he didn't relax. He knew Brenda Sterling wouldn't accept defeat that easily. He was right. It began one night, just after midnight. Marcus was woken by the sharp crack of breaking glass. He rolled from bed instantly, instincts kicking in. His hand found the old service pistol he kept in the nightstand. Moving silently, he swept the cabin room by room, heart steady, ears tuned to every creak of the old wood. Finally, in the kitchen, he found it. A rock lying on the floor, shards of glass scattered across the counter. Someone had thrown it through his window. On the rock was taped a note. "Sell and leave. Last warning." Marcus stared at it for a long moment, jaw tightening. This wasn't a nuisance anymore. This was war. The next morning, he set to work. Not with anger, but with precision. He boarded the window, reinforced the locks, and set up motion sensor lights around the cabin. Then he walked the perimeter, marking out sight lines the way he once did on patrol. By the time he was done, his property wasn't just a cabin anymore. It was a fortress. But Brenda wasn't finished. A few days later, Marcus came down to the dock to find his boat half sunk, water sloshing inside. Someone had slashed the bilge pump hoses, leaving the hull to flood. He spent hours dragging it back to shore, repairing the damage. Each minute, his resolve grew sharper. Brenda thought she was breaking him. What she didn't understand was that pressure only made Marcus stronger. That night, as he sat on the porch, the forest buzzing with cicadas, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't going to wait for Brenda's next move. He was going to study her, watch her, learn her patterns the way he once tracked insurgent leaders in dusty villages half a world away. The hunter was about to become the hunted. For 3 nights, Marcus kept to the shadows. He parked his truck down the trail and hiked silently to the edge of Brenda's neighborhood. Her house was easy to spot, a towering monstrosity of stone and glass, lit up like a beacon against the night. From the tree line, Marcus observed. He saw the visitors, county officials dropping by late in the evening, leaving with envelopes tucked under their arms. Deputies stopping in for coffee, laughing as Brenda handed them gifts in plain sight. It wasn't hard to piece together. She ran her little HOA like a fiefdom, buying loyalty with favors and intimidation. But Marcus also saw something else. Brenda wasn't invincible. She had routines. Every night around 10, she'd walk her property, checking locks, strutting as if daring the world to challenge her. Then, around 11, she'd retreat inside, blinds drawn, wine glass in hand. Marcus filed away every detail. Timing, weaknesses, blind spots. And as he watched, he began to see a path forward. The way to beat Brenda, Sterling, wasn't through brute force. It wasn't through yelling or brawling. It was through patience, exposure, strategy. The same way he dismantled threats overseas, Marcus Reed was about to dismantle her, piece by piece. Brenda Sterling wasn't satisfied with broken glass and a sinking boat. No, that was child's play. Her true weapon was reputation. Within a week, whispers began snaking through town. Marcus was unstable. Marcus was a violent veteran with PTSD. Marcus was a danger to the community. The lies spread faster than wildfire. Local shopkeepers gave him wary glances. The clerk at the hardware store suddenly stopped small talk. Even the sheriff, a man who once thanked Marcus for his service, began keeping his tone cold and clipped. Marcus knew exactly where it came from. Brenda had money. Brenda had influence. And most of all, Brenda had the arrogance to think she could erase him socially before she erased him physically. But Marcus didn't bite. He didn't lash out. Instead, he started collecting. He carried a small recorder in his pocket. Every conversation, every veiled threat, every insult dripping from the lips of Brenda's allies. He documented it all, calmly, methodically, the way a soldier lays mines before a retreating enemy. Because Marcus knew something Brenda didn't. In war, perception mattered. But truth could topple empires. One evening, Marcus spotted a county SUV parked at the end of his trail. 2 men inside, pretending to check on zoning boundaries. He smiled to himself. Surveillance. Brenda had upgraded her tactics. Instead of confronting them, Marcus turned the tables. He invited them in, offered coffee, let them sit at his table while his hidden recorder caught every word of their bumbling attempt to pressure him into voluntarily selling the property. The brilliance wasn't in resisting them. The brilliance was in making them talk. Making them reveal Brenda's fingerprints without even realizing it. By the time they left, Marcus had hours of audio evidence, proof of coercion, proof of corruption, proof of Brenda's overreach. But Marcus didn't release it yet. No, he was still studying her, still waiting for the moment she'd overextend. Because Brenda Sterling was predictable, and predators like her always grew greedy. It came sooner than Marcus expected. A week later, 2 deputies showed up at his cabin with grim faces. Marcus Reed, one of them said, "We received a complaint that you brandished a firearm at Mrs. Sterling during a property dispute." Marcus almost laughed. He hadn't been near her property in days. But Brenda had filed a formal statement, complete with fake witnesses backing her story. For the first time, Marcus felt the icy hand of danger creep down his spine. This wasn't just harassment anymore. She was trying to destroy his freedom. The deputies hesitated. They knew Marcus. They didn't want to make the arrest. But procedure forced their hand. Marcus raised his palms calmly. Do what you have to. But I'll warn you, this isn't going to end how Brenda thinks it will. At the station, he sat quietly, letting the process unfold. Fingerprints. Paperwork. The cold bench of the holding cell. But Marcus wasn't broken. He was patient, because in his jacket pocket, even as they locked him in, was a tiny flash drive. On it sat weeks of recordings. Every threat, every bribe, every deputy who came sniffing around with Brenda's words in their mouth. Marcus had baited her, and Brenda Sterling had walked right into the snare. Marcus sat in the holding cell, the dull hum of the fluorescent light buzzing above him. To any outsider, he looked calm, almost resigned. But behind his stillness, gears turned. Every second he sat there, Brenda's arrogance was carving her own downfall. Hours later, he was released, pending investigation. Brenda's story was flimsy, and without hard proof, the deputies had no choice but to let him walk. But Marcus knew Brenda wasn't after one win. She was after attrition, the slow grind of false accusations, legal battles, and stress until he broke. But Marcus wasn't built to break. He was built to fight. That night, he set his counterattack in motion. Step 1. The press. Marcus mailed anonymous packets of evidence, recordings, transcripts, and photographs, to a local investigative journalist known for tearing down corrupt officials. Within days, whispers about Brenda's shady dealings began appearing online. Step 2. The neighbors. Marcus didn't beg for sympathy. He showed them the truth. Quiet conversations over coffee, proof in hand. The same people who once gave him cold looks now stared in disbelief at the mountain of evidence Brenda had tried to bury. Step 3. The officials. County clerks, zoning officers, deputies. Marcus had their voices on tape, carrying out Brenda's commands. When confronted with their own words, some turned defensive. Others grew pale, and a few flipped, offering to testify in exchange for protection. Brenda Sterling had built her empire on fear, but Marcus was stripping that fear away, one brick at a time. Brenda sensed the shift. At a charity gala, she overheard whispers about recordings, about documents, about the veteran who's not backing down. Her polished smile cracked. Panic flickered behind her eyes. That very night, she struck back. Marcus returned home to find his cabin door ajar, hinges splintered. Inside, drawers were overturned, files scattered, his laptop smashed to pieces. The message was clear. Stop, or next time, it won't just be property. But what Brenda didn't know was that Marcus had anticipated this. The evidence wasn't stored in that cabin. It was duplicated, encrypted, and hidden in multiple places, safe with people she couldn't touch. Marcus stood in the ruins of his home, the cool mountain air blowing through broken windows. And instead of anger, he felt a quiet satisfaction, because Brenda had just crossed into desperation, and desperation was sloppy. The town was no longer hers. Where once Brenda Sterling commanded fear, now people avoided her. Business owners whispered behind her back. The sheriff's office, once her lapdog, grew hesitant. Still, Brenda refused to yield. She doubled down, filing lawsuits against Marcus for defamation and harassment. She drained her own accounts, funding lawyers, convinced her money could still buy silence. But every time she struck, Marcus answered with precision. More evidence. More recordings. Witnesses who once stood with Brenda, now stepping forward to admit they'd lied under her orders. And then came the bombshell. The journalist Marcus had fed went public with a full expose. Headlines splashed across the county paper. Local heiress accused of corruption, witness tampering, and harassment of war veteran. For the first time, Brenda couldn't hide behind money. The public eye was on her. And worse, state investigators took notice. One autumn evening, as the sun bled red across the mountains, Marcus was repairing the broken frame of his cabin window when headlights approached. Brenda's car. She stepped out, heels crunching on gravel, fury etched across her face. But behind the anger, there was something else, fear. Do you think you've won, Marcus? She hissed. You think people will believe you over me? Marcus straightened, meeting her gaze. I don't need them to believe me. I just need them to hear you in your own words. Her face went pale. She knew exactly what he meant. He continued, his voice steady low. Every threat, every order, every lie, it's all recorded. And tomorrow, it's in the hands of the state attorney. For the first time, Brenda Sterling had no comeback. No smirk, no arrogance, just silence, and the heavy weight of a woman who realized her empire was crumbling. She turned, muttering, "This isn't over." But her voice cracked, and Marcus knew it was. The weeks that followed were a storm. Brenda Sterling was indicted on charges of witness tampering, filing false reports, and corruption. Her allies abandoned her. Her carefully curated reputation shattered overnight. In court, she sat in designer clothes that couldn't mask the emptiness in her eyes. The same woman who once tormented Marcus with smug confidence now looked like a ghost of herself. Witness after witness testified. Recordings played for the jury. Brenda's voice filled the courtroom, dripping with venom and arrogance. And every word was another nail in her coffin. The verdict came swift and brutal, guilty on all counts. As bailiffs led her away in handcuffs, Brenda's eyes locked on Marcus. No words, no threats, just the hollow stare of someone who finally understood that her reign of fear was over.